companies overestimate by like 2 or 3 or 4x what they think that real property impact is going to be. And so, that has an impact then on how it's taxed, number one, and then how you structure potential property tax payments, from a real versus personal property tax standpoint. So overvaluing, setting kind of a perhaps an incorrect initial estimate or expectation to the community, it's not the end of the world, but it's certainly something you want to avoid. When you go in and kind of set the expectations and you have your initial meeting, you want to have accurate information so that they have a good understanding of what the tax impacts are going to be and how much of the school is going to get, how much is the city and the county and all that going to get.
Well, welcome to our Industrial Advisors podcast from IMC in Quebec City. We have Bill Condon and Matt McGregor, and we have a great guest with us today, Chris Knezevic.
Yeah, Chris
there we
K
go.
is fine.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
Chris K. With Vorys.
Nobody gets it right on the first time.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah, I feel like I had it. I practiced it, and
And then you lost it.
Yeah,
And
then I
then
lost
the
it.
cameras turn on, you're like, oh.
Chris K. All right. With Vorys, who's also going to be a speaker at IMC, which is awesome. Tell us a little bit about your career path, what you do, and how you ended up where you are.
So I guess to start with kind of what I do, I work for a law firm, Vorys, Sater, Seymour & Peace. We are headquartered out of Columbus, Ohio. I'm an attorney in our economic development incentives practice. And our group has grown from, 20 plus years ago when Scott Zients, who leads our group, when he started it as basically a one-man shop, to now we are one of the largest law firm-based economic development groups in the country. And we represent clients from all over the country doing work all over the country. So it's been a really dynamic practice. We represent everybody from, the Fortune 50s that everybody know, out in California and elsewhere, to a lot of industrial developers, a lot of data center developers, some startups, early stage capital companies, and even in Ohio, some political subdivisions and things like that. So we really see, as far as representation standpoint, we really kind of see a little bit of everything.
Yeah, you're doing it all.
Yeah. Well, we try. And then as far as how I got here, I mean, just like everybody else, I dreamt of being an economic developer since I was 5. This is like what I went to school for, so I went to law school for. So, it's great.
Kindergarten speech was
I'm living my dreams, my
Economic
childhood
development,
dreams.
baby. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, I went to Miami of Ohio undergrad, Case Western Reserve for law school. And I grew up in Cleveland. I love it. It's a great place to raise a family. While I was in law school, I realized it's not a place that I want to be as a 23-year-old, So I moved to Chicago once I graduated, just like a lot of people in Ohio.
Yep.
And I ended up, bouncing around really early on, and then I really got my start in economic development with EY. I was with EY for a long time, both in Chicago and then Charlotte. And then I ended up, my wife's from Columbus. We ended up kind of coming back home about 7.5 years ago, and that's when I joined Vorys. And it's been a tremendous experience really ever since. Like I said, just how I mapped it out.
Yeah, exactly.
All those years ago in law school. No, never even heard of economic development incentives in law school. So,
What's your topic here when you present?
Yeah, so for my presentation, Scott, our group lead, and I are presenting on top 10 lessons learned in negotiating property tax incentives agreements. So we've been lucky to present, several times at IAMC, and we've done a bunch of different topics. And so this is what we're doing this time.
Great.
We're back.
I didn't know law firms did this. Like I've talked to a lot of people that do incentives. Is that unique to you guys?
I think it's unique from a national perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are a lot of really good law firms where if you go into a state, there'll be really good expertise, really good experts on their states, their incentives, and help, guide, provide as much support as needed. whether it's a negotiation or if it's just doing the documentation, negotiating the agreements. But as far as the law firms that have groups that kind of do it everywhere, I think it's a pretty small group of law firms. So I think we're fairly unique in that aspect. And quite frankly, it's why I'm still doing what I'm doing, because the ability to represent the diverse, clients that we have in jurisdictions all over the country is amazing. It's what keeps it interesting.
Very cool. And you mentioned data centers. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in that industry, because we're hearing, somebody literally said to me yesterday, U.S. is going to be like out of power because of the grab of power going on right now.
Yeah. Boy, where to even begin? I mean, we could do like a whole.
Well,
let's talk about it. I want to learn too.
If we're going to run out of power, people want to hear about it.
I'm not sure I'm qualified to weigh in on that necessarily. But yeah, so we are fortunate enough to represent a lot of data center developers and also end users or companies that would build their own data centers for their needs. What's going on is, you're completely right. I mean, there's a big shift in perception from state and local communities on data centers, and I think the communities that went hard on recruiting them and were successful in bringing them in, are starting to realize that some of the utility requirements are causing issues for other needs and future growth.
It's just taking all of the power.
Yeah. And so what we're seeing is, my group is probably doing like 16, 17 data center deals across the country right now. And we're seeing not only there be a rush, I think, to try to lock down sites to kind of preserve future growth opportunities and, current needs as well. But the thing that's I think is really interesting is I'm seeing it in locations that aren't is where you'd expect. We're seeing them go to different states where you go, really, a data center is going to go to that state? It doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, it's not the Virginia, Ohio, Georgia that we've been seeing. We're seeing them in more kind of non-traditional states, and it is because of things like power or, water access.
It's always water access, right?
Yeah, right. And some of the technology, which is beyond me, I think is they're trying to figure out different ways to cool the equipment so water may not be quite as vital, or they can they're developing technologies to, reuse it, things like that. Again, I am not the technical expert on that. But yeah, right now, I think the big focus is power. And we're seeing companies go to really, interesting areas because there is power and they're trying to lock down the sites.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised when I think of a data center, I don't think of incentives, because why would a state care? Because it's just taking power and not a lot of jobs, right? So tell us about that. Why would they?
What's the benefit? Yeah. So first of all, there is the tax impact obviously is positive.
Yeah.
So you may abate, the property taxes, but you're going to get the income taxes from the construction of it, which could be significant.
Okay.
From the employees,
Yep.
from the sales taxes, things like that. You're right. It's not necessarily the big employment driver, that a manufacturing facility would be, or semiconductor, EV, something like that. But it's also, I think, for community, kind of low risk, because there aren't a lot of employees. There's not a massive impact on school districts
and roads
roads and infrastructure. The jobs are pretty well paying as well. And I think that you'd be surprised at how many jobs are actually maybe not directly created, but indirectly as well.
Right.
So I think we're seeing the power issues. I think, though, for the right community, I think it's a really good product.
That's great. And so you said 16 or so that your firm's working on.
Yeah.
Do you know about the size of the U.S. grid, on how many are underway right now?
I don't, actually. Okay. That's a very good question. I wish I had that information, but I don't. Yeah.
Very good.
So you guys are in a unique situation on those deals, because you are trying to, speed is really important, as you outlined. Yep. So what are some of the challenges that you run into in negotiating deals like that prevent deals from getting done?
Well, from a prevention standpoint, I think there's, because of that perception of what the impact is on the utilities. So that, of course, is going to cause, some issues, especially in the traditional markets. So, we've seen issues in Georgia and Ohio and elsewhere where, there's been instances where the states kind of maybe pulling back and they say, no, we'll go forward as far as their support goes, kind of reevaluating everything. So obviously that causes issues just from a current footprint or the current areas that are, traditional for data centers. I think for going into new areas, I think some of the tough things are, these are massive projects, okay, and multi-billion-dollar projects.
Right.
And so we're looking at, trying to secure incentives over a much longer time period than a traditional $100 million, $50 million, whatever. So we're trying to look at 20, 30 years down the road, securing something. So you're going into markets that aren't really traditional markets that may not have the sophistication, to negotiate and understand kind of what the project is and how it's going to impact them. And then you're also potentially introducing kind of newer concepts to them. They may not have gone that far before. You may be setting some precedent. So you're trying to move fast in order to help the company lock down the site, but you have a community you're dealing with that, hasn't really done this before and needs time to work through it and, get educated and do their analysis and get comfortable with it. So the speed of it is challenging, depending on where you are right now. But just like anything, there's some communities that will jump on board right away.
Sure.
And they're tremendous partners. Others, there's just a little more hand-holding that's needed.
Yeah, you almost have to educate the other side as well on deals like that. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're speaking at the AMC conference, and in a couple of weeks, people will listen that either didn't attend your session or did. What are the takeaways that you'd want people to remember about your session? You said there's 10. Kind of not that I want you to quote them because you probably didn't memorize them, but yeah, exactly.
I still have time to prepare.
Yeah.
That's what this is for.
That's right. So what are the key takeaways of your talk?
So we're talking about data centers and we're talking about big projects. So I'll give you one example that I think is relevant that we're going to touch on. One is understanding classifications of real and personal property. We've had a few recent, kind of mega project, if you want to call it that, companies who are coming into a state that they have not done a scope of a project that size in that state before. And so they're saying, all right, well, we're going to, our real property investment is going to be, I'll just pick numbers out of midair to give you an example, $500 million. And our personal property investment is going to be $1.5 billion, And depending on the state, what actually qualifies as real property, maybe more, maybe less. And oftentimes we've seen companies overestimate by like 2 or 3 or 4x what they think that real property impact is going to be. And so, that has an impact then on how it's taxed, number one, and then how you structure potential property tax payments, from a real versus personal property tax standpoint. So overvaluing, setting kind of a perhaps an incorrect initial estimate or expectation to the community, it's not the end of the world, but it's certainly something you want to avoid. When you go in and kind of set the expectations and you have your initial meeting, you want to have accurate information so that they have a good understanding of what the tax impacts are going to be and how much of the school is going to get, how much is the city and the county and all that going to get. And so if your numbers are off from the get-go and you never correct it, that could create issues, number one, in your agreement if you're supposed to hit certain targets. If your real property
for sure
investment commitment is $500 million, but it's only, in that state, it's only taxed at $200 million. Well, you're not going to hit your commitment.
Right.
So there are a couple facets to it as far as why something like that would be important. So those are the types of topics that, that we'll cover in our session. That's great.
Well, we're excited for your session, and we greatly appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah,
this was fascinating. Mostly the data center work that you're doing.
Good.
It's going to be interesting over the next couple of years.
It'll definitely be interesting to see it develop and the power grab continue.
For sure.
Yeah,
no doubt. Well, I really appreciate you guys having me here. It's an amazing setting here in Quebec.
So it is.
It's really cool.
Very
really
cool
something
city.
else. Yeah, it's been terrific.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
All right.